You smell it before you see it. Rotting moss, damp hair, and something like blood baked onto old stone. The kind of scent that sticks in your nose and tells your spine to go cold. The wind shifts, the mountain creaks, and then, out of the shadows, a thing of bone, hunger, and ancient hate begins to rise. But this isn't a battlefield. There's no shield wall here. No war cries, no battle horns. Just the silence of the forest, and something watching from just beyond the tree line. Today, we're not talking about heroes. We're not talking about kings, conquests, or Viking raids up the Thames. No, today we confront the monstrous. The thing that grabs goats in the night. The thing that rips trees from the ground like kindling. The thing that hungers for human flesh and has absolutely no regard for your travel itinerary. We're talking about trolls. Not the fuzzy, harried kind that you find in the dollar store. Not the bridge-lurking kind from your third-grade fairy tale. And definitely not the online variety that argues about horned helmets in YouTube comments. No, we mean the real kind. The kind Vikings feared. The kind they wrote into sagas like whispered warnings. The kind that some people believe still live in the mountains centuries after the Viking Age has ended. In this episode, we travel into the deep wilds of the Viking imagination. We'll explore the saga of a warrior prince who awakens something in a burial mound that should have never been disturbed. The ancient ruins, they used to bind such creatures, not kill them. And what the word troll really meant to a Viking, and why it still echoes through the hills of Iceland and the dark forests of Norway to this day. We'll hear tales of monstrous armies summoned by witches, and how even the strongest warriors could fall, not because they weren't brave, but because they forgot that some boundaries are not meant to be crossed. We'll talk about ruins, rage, rocks that remember, and fear that doesn't die with the dawn. Because trolls aren't just stories. They are the wild personified. They are boundaries, guardians, echoes of time before time. They are what rises when the land is angry and when we forget our place in it. So light your torch, stay near the fire, because the question we're asking today isn't just, did they believe in trolls? It's this: could something like them still be hidden in the forgotten wilds of the north? They say there's a place in the far north where even the wind forgets how to breathe. A rise of land, round as a shield, older than the oldest village. The locals call it Bone Mound, but only when they have to. No birds perch there, no flowers grow. Even moss dies trying to cling to its stones. And the people in the valley below, they don't speak its name after sundown. But not every man listens to the warnings. The warrior prince, he had heard the stories. He'd seen the villagers' eyes go glassy when he asked about the hill. But he was not from that valley, and he didn't fear the stone. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a wolfskin cloak slung over his back and a sword at his side. A sword that had tasted blood on 3 continents. His people sang songs about his duels and his daring. They said his breath was like iron and his shadow was like thunderclouds, and yet, as he neared the top of the hill, even he began to feel it. The air thinned, the trees leaned away. The sky, cloudless moments ago, lowered like a lid. Behind him trudged his companion, a scout from the region, a nervous man with a sharp eye and a sharper instinct for survival. "We shouldn't be here," the scout said, voice low as pine needles. "This place is sealed. It's sealed for a reason." The prince kept walking. At the summit stood a cairn, a stack of black stones, each one carved with runes. Most were faded with age, but one stood out, fresh, almost warm to the touch, bound in blood, woken by pride. The prince tilted his head. A warning or a dare? The scout didn't answer. He had already taken a step backward. That night, they made camp by the cairn. No fire. The stars watched from above, silent and cold. The wind dropped. The mist rolled in. Not from the valley, but from the ground itself. It crept in slow like fingers. Then came the sound. Not loud, not sudden, just the slow grind of stone on stone. The cairn shifted. One stone slid aside by itself, and from the dark beneath it, a hand emerged, long, gray, thick with old scars. Its fingers ended in iron-colored claws, its knuckles bent backwards. Then came the arm, then a shoulder, then a head. A head too large, with eyes like embers burned in ash. It rose, not like a man climbing out of a grave, but like a mountain remembering how to move. The creature was taller than a doorframe, wider than a bull. Its back was hunched. Its skin looked like frozen bark. Tusks curled from the corners of its mouth. Its breath steamed in the cold air, and it smelled like soil that had been soaked in blood and forgotten. The prince stood. He didn't reach for a sword, not yet. The creature looked at him and spoke. "You have broken the seal." Its voice was like a glacier cracking in spring, deep, slow, cold. "Are you its keeper?" the prince asked. The creature smiled, a horrible, cracked expression. "I was a man, then a giant, then bound." It took a step forward. The ground shuddered. The scout behind the prince panicked and then turned to run. The troll moved like lightning, snatched him by the leg and slammed him into the cairn with a crack that echoed down into the trees. He didn't get up. Now, the prince drew his sword. Steel met starlight. He charged and the troll met him mid-step. The two collided like wolves. The prince drove his blade into the creature's thigh. It sank in, barely. Black blood spilled, thick and sticky as tar. The troll didn't flinch. It swung one massive arm, sending the prince tumbling through the frost-coated grass. He rolled, stood, and limped. And then he saw it. The ruin on the cairn. It was glowing. The stone that said bound in blood. The prince dropped his sword, and he bit the palm of his hand deep, and he pressed it against the ruin, and it flashed bright red, then gold. Then the troll roared, not in pain, but in recognition. It froze. One foot turned into stone, then the leg, then the chest, and with a final snarling exhale, the creature's head turned into granite, solid, still, silent. By dawn, the hill was empty. Only the warrior remained. He stood beside the now quiet cairn, gripping the hilt of his sword like it was the only warm thing in the world. His companion was gone. Whether taken by wolves or gods, no one would say. The prince wiped his palm on his cloak and stared at the stone face of the creature. "It's not dead," he said aloud, voice raw. "It's waiting." And he walked away, never to return. But in that valley, they still whisper about the hill. They say that when the mist rises without reason, when goats vanish from their pens, when you hear the cracking sound that isn't ice, it's because the warrior prince wasn't the last to climb the hill, just the last to walk back down. To understand how the Norse viewed trolls, we must first forget everything we think we know about monsters. In the Viking world, trolls were not fictional. They were not the bad guys in a two-dimensional myth. They were deeply integrated into how the Norse explained the world around them. From thunder and avalanche to grief and madness, trolls were the Norse language of fear. Not abstract fear, but tangible, topographical fear. The kind you can point to on a map and say, "That ridge, that one with the weird stones that smells like copper when it rains, yeah, that's where one of them sleeps." To the Norse, trolls were not a species. They were a category of cosmic error. The word itself in Old Norse, troll, was less specific, less a species name and more a label for something gone wrong. Some trolls were giants. Some were shapeshifters. Some were witches or the undead. Some were things that had once been human, now mutated by isolation, curses, or ancient power. It was as if the word troll meant this thing doesn't obey the laws of men, gods, or nature. The word troll doesn't always mean a creature. In early texts, it has a variety of meanings, describing a person experiencing psychosomatic condition, meaning physical reaction that originates from emotional or mental distress. To be taken by a troll could mean to literally be bewitched, cursed, or mentally shattered. That's right, before trolls were big and hairy, they were emotional and existential. So yes, your Viking ancestors might have been afraid of a 10-foot tall troll in the woods, but they were equally afraid of what a troll could do to your mind, to your honor, or to your soul. In story after story, trolls don't just live anywhere. They live in between places, spots that are on the edge of the world people know and the world of the unknown. They were gateways, doors to another world. In fact, one of the oldest descriptions of trolls comes from a 9th century scholar who describes a troll as being he who dwells in caves, under stones, or in the dark corners of the earth. Trolls were not just enemies, they were landmarks of forgotten truths. In culture, it wasn't unusual for warriors to leave offerings at stones or hills they thought might house trolls, not to appease them, but to avoid waking them. Sometimes Vikings didn't want to fight the troll. They wanted to respect the boundary it enforced. You don't fight a mountain, you bow to it, and you avoid it entirely. The Norse didn't have therapy, they had sagas, and trolls were often what you got when the story couldn't bear to name the trauma directly. A family that vanished into the snow, well, a troll took them. A child who lost their voice after seeing something in the woods, a troll touched them. A warrior who returned from the wild, different, angry, cruel, broken. The troll didn't kill him, it changed him. They weren't monsters in the sense of evil. They were embodiments of things impossible to cope with, and grief that hadn't healed. In this way, trolls were more than beasts. Now let's get academic for a moment, or maybe a little bit philosophical. In one of the most sacred poems in the Poetic Edda, the seeress describes a world before Odin, before Asgard, before creation itself. And who was already there? Giant troll women. That's right, trolls predate the gods. They are not just older, they are pre-cosmic. Before the 9 realms were made, trolls were already hiding in the corners of nothing. That changes the whole game. Could Ymir be a troll? That would mean that the remnants of the trolls would be evident throughout all of Norse creation. A way to explain that everything is infected with corruption. Could it be Ymir's revenge? Now comes the most important part of the Norse mythology. Trolls weren't just monsters to kill. They were tests. In saga tradition, every hero who meets a troll isn't just fighting a beast. They're confronting their own flaw. Arrogance, rage, curiosity gone too far, pride that refuses to listen. If the hero fails the test, the troll destroys them. If they pass, it's never by slaying the troll. It's by binding it, by offering blood, by learning the lesson. Halfdan, in our story we just read moments ago, he doesn't kill the troll. He doesn't slay the creature. He seals it with blood, drawn from his own hand, offered not in triumph, but in atonement. The ruin accepts the sacrifice. The earth falls silent. And when he walks away, it's not just as a victor, but as a man who knows he came too close to something that remembers the world before men had names. That's Viking storytelling at its most profound. In many versions of Norse folklore, the way to defeat a troll isn't to out it. It's to outwit it, outweigh it, or recognize it in yourself. Some sagas even hint that the greatest warrior feared becoming trolls themselves, not by curse, but by losing their humanity to rage. So the next time someone tells you trolls are fairy tale nonsense, remind them trolls were older than Odin, more clever than the legends admit, and far more frightening than fangs or claws, because they didn't just stalk the forest, they hunted the corners of the mind. You think the Viking Age ended and the trolls just clocked out? Like, well, the Christians are here and it's time to clean out the cave, clock out and retire to some scenic fjord and journal our feelings and get into baking sourdough bread. No. If anything, trolls got weirder, more stubborn, and wildly more folkloric after the Viking Age. Trolls survived the fall of Asgard, the rise of Christianity, and somehow found their way into Netflix and Icelandic road planning committees. And, of course, that one uncle who swears he saw something in the fog near Trondheim in 1983. When Christianity came knocking, showing up with scripture, sanctimony, and a holy urge to redecorate everything pagan, the old gods began to fade. But the trolls, they pivoted. They shapeshift from saga titans into rural weirdos of Scandinavian folk belief. You know the type that live in a cave and guard bridges, smell like wet pine and goat hair, the kind that get angry if you build a church too close to their hill, and were quite possibly allergic to church bells. One of the biggest folklore shifts, trolls began to fossilize, as in literally they turned to stone in sunlight. This shift is usually chalked up to Christian influence and a Christian metaphor. Light equals God, troll equals evil or ignorance, and light prevails. But here's another theory, and it's one the sagas won't say out loud. What if the trolls of the post-Viking Age weren't monsters at all, but people? Not just any people, pagans, those who refused to convert when Christianity swept across the land, waving incense and declaring the old ways dead. The unbaptized, the stubborn, the unwelcome. They were pushed to the margins, out of the villages and into the hills. They lived in the forests, under bridges, behind waterfalls, not because they were mythical creatures, but because they had no place in the new world. No homes, no clean clothes, no church bells, and slowly over generations their stories twisted, from men in rags to monsters in shadows, from outcasts to ogres, from human to troll. It makes a chilling kind of sense. Fast forward to the present day. Now, trolls are actually sabotaging infrastructure. In 2012, Iceland's road agency actually halted a highway project because locals protested it would disturb a boulder known as a troll home. Eyewitnesses claimed machinery kept mysteriously breaking down, and workers became injured unexpectedly. Strange lights were seen around the site. Now, is that true? Did science explain it? Sure. But nevertheless, the trolls rerouted the road. In the 21st century, a major world government replanned a highway because of alleged troll real estate. Ever hiked in Norway or Iceland? No? Me either. But maybe someday. If and when you do, you'll come across a rock formation with the name Troll's Tongue, or the Troll Wall, or the Troll Church. Are these just cute names slapped on rock formations by humorous cartographers? Or are they simple biographies of the stones themselves? Local legends claim those formations were trolls that had been stomping around at night, turned to stone at sunrise. Which means you can go hiking on the fossilized corpse of an ancient troll. Just don't forget to pack a sandwich for your snack at the top. These Nordic trolls continue to thrive beyond the Viking Age. This is another reason why the word Viking is way bigger than what the Norse used to do a few months out of the year. The whole entire age has so much influence in our modern world. We don't hardly comprehend the amount. Not only that, but this influence didn't come from just one country. It came from Norway, from Iceland, from Greenland, from the Danes, from Normandy. And so the next time someone trolls you by saying Viking was just a verb, not a noun, just realize that they have a small view of the Viking Age and fail to comprehend its grandeur and its influence and its significance in people's lives today. I digress. Back to trolls. Tolkien gave us trolls, again, influenced by Norse mythology. You can also listen to the episode on Envari's Ring to hear more of Tolkien's influence by Norse mythology. Tolkien's version of the troll was a brutish cave beast, dumb muscle for the forces of darkness, often paired with poor grammar and a club. In more modern times, we see movies made about trolls. In 2010, The Troll Hunter. In 2022, Netflix came out with Troll. And yes, even Frozen gave us trolls. But let's be honest, those were closer to sentimental mossballs in a musical therapy group. Still, the roots are there. Even cute trolls remain avatars of ancient chaos. This isn't a departure from Norse thinking because, as we have seen, they recognize trolls as having power over the mind. So then, what if trolls still exist? Not in mountains or fairy tales, but in us. In Jungian psychology, monsters often symbolize the shadow self, the parts of us we bury, deny, or refuse to name. And trolls? They're perfect shadows, born from what we refuse to face, shaped by old trauma, sleeping beneath the surface of our routines. You want a modern troll? Try the voice in your head that says you're not good enough, or the resentment you feed in secret. Try that rage that flares up like a storm, or the fear that keeps you from climbing your own mountain. That is a troll. But like the sagas teach us, you don't always kill a troll. You bind it, you name it, you keep it from waking up in the dark. Here's the thing, trolls were never just about claws or teeth. They were about boundaries. They guarded hills we shouldn't climb, mounds we shouldn't open, feelings we shouldn't ignore, and powers we shouldn't crave. They're the embodiment of don't go there. And when you do, they rise. So yes, trolls may turn into stone in sunlight, but the question is, who's still wandering in the dark? In the golden age of heroes, there lived a king whose name lit the sky like the northern star. He was called the Golden King, wise in counsel, fearless in battle, beloved by the land he ruled. His hall rang with laughter, his warriors drank like thunder, and peace settled over his kingdom like snow upon the mountaintops. But beneath every golden crown, the shadow, and her name, well, it was Sister. She came from the same blood, but not the same soul. She smiled with her lips, but never with her eyes. And though she sat at his table and raised her cup in toast, she listened, she watched, she waited. For the day she would take it all. They say that she studied the old ways, not the honored rites of the ancestors, but the forbidden ones. While the priests blessed with oil, she whispered to bones. While the seers read ruins, she spoke to the dead. She laid her hands on the skulls of wolves and dreamed in the tongues of spirits. She was a queen, yes, but in secret, she was also a witch. And when she turned her heart to war, she didn't call for swords. She called for what slept beneath the earth. From the cold forests, from the caves hidden beyond the waterfalls, from burial mounds older than time, they came. Not men, not beasts, something in between. They were bent-back, tusk-faced, moss-skinned creatures. They smelled of the river mud. Some had teeth like carved bone, others moved like smoke. A few still wore the scraps of what they once were, warriors who died badly, called back with blood. Trolls, undead, beasts carved from a nightmare and sealed with spells. They did not march, they lumbered. They did not chant, they groaned. And where they passed, the grass did not grow again. At the center of them rode the witch, her eyes full of stars, her hands dripping with power. Word reached the Golden King. He gathered his champions, the finest warriors in the north, men whose names sang like swords through the saga sky. And among them was the bare-hearted one. He was not loud, he did not boast, but in battle, they said, he changed. that a great bear walked where he fought, that his spirit became claw and rage and roar, tearing through the enemy like a storm wrapped in fur. The king and his warriors rode to meet the witch and her creatures on the field that still stinks of ash to this day. At first, it was quiet. Then the wind changed, and they arrived. The trolls, the risen, cursed, with no banners, no horns, only breath like smoke and eyes like ember stone. They fell upon the king's army like a wave of bone and hunger. And for a while, the heroes held. They cut down monsters, they shattered skulls, they roared and cheered, but the enemy did not fall because they did not fear death. They'd already died once. And then a moment of silence. The bare-hearted one, he didn't rise from his tent that morning. He lay there gripped by a spell woven by the witch herself. His bare spirit was on the field, but not his body. A soul without a vessel, a claw without a hand. The king looked across the battlefield and didn't see his fiercest warrior. He knew then he would not see the dawn. He fell with 3 spears in his chest, and the bear vanished. The spell broke, the warrior awoke, and he ran to the field, heart full of fire. He saw his king, his brother, dead among the stones. He saw trolls feasting where songs should have been sung. He became the bear, the man and beast, bound by fury. He ripped through the enemy like a flood through the frost. But even rage has its limits, and the witch, she did not. By sunset, the Golden King's hall was dark, his throne empty, his people scattered, and the witch, she ruled for a time. Some say the trolls turned on her. Others say she vanished into the hills with her creatures, waiting to rise again. Still others say she was sealed beneath a mountain, bones turned to stone, but eyes still watching. And to this day, the valleys of the north, they say, if the mist comes early, if the wolves go silent, if the wind smells of wet ash, then she is near, and her army sleeps beneath your feet. Because this was no ordinary war. This was not a story of conquest. This was the tale of a woman who summoned what should have stayed buried, who traded love for power, who fed the earth what the gods had sealed. She won the crown, but the cost was everything else. So what do we make of all this? The burial mound, the blood-bound ruin, the witch and her troll army rising like a nightmare the world forgot to finish. It would be easy to call these just stories, just sagas carved from the old fears and colder winters. But if you've made it this far, you know better. Because the Norse didn't invent trolls to entertain children. They didn't carve ruins and bind blood just to pass the time. They told these stories because they understood something we are just beginning to remember. Trolls are not fantasy. They are a language for pain, for fear, for the thing that hunts us from the inside out. And the greatest Viking wisdom is this: you don't have to slay the troll, you just have to face it. Maybe your troll isn't a beast in a burial mound. Maybe it's a secret you've never said out loud. A fear you've kept locked behind sarcasm and small talk. A voice that says, you're not ready. You'll fail. Stay small. That troll doesn't need to break through your walls. It already lived behind them. But here's the power of the saga. When the prince saw the creature rise, he didn't run, he didn't boast, he bled. He offered his own wound, his own courage, and that act, that self-sacrifice sealed the monster, not with violence, but with truth. And when you face your troll, your past, your fear, your shadow, you will bleed. That's the price. But what you gain in return is your life back. Not as a victim, not as a survivor, but as someone who walked into the dark, faced the beast, and came out with fire in their hands. That's what these stories are about. Not magic, mastery, not monsters, meaning, not death, becoming. So walk with your head high, speak truth, climb the hill no one else dares. leave an offering, light a torch, and if you feel the ground tremble, don't run. You were born to stand at the edge, to face what others fear, to bind what was meant to destroy you, and to walk away, not hunted, but transformed. In just a moment, it'll be time to go, and there will be trolls to face, and you will become a legend. And if this stirred something in you, if the cairn cracked open inside of your imagination, if the witch's army made your skin crawl in the best way possible, if you felt your heartbeat sync with the rhythm of the ancient war drum, then this wasn't just a podcast. This was a summons, and now you carry the fire. So here's what I ask. Don't let it stop with you. Send it to a friend. Send it to someone who walks the edge. Text the link to one who stares too long into the forest. Post it to the Viking group that you're in. Drop it into the lore forums of Viking Legacy. The sagas must continue, because stories like this, they weren't made to live on playlists. They were made to move through the people like wind through the pines. They were meant to be shared like mead and memory around the hearth. And if this tale woke up part of you, the part that knows courage isn't always loud, the part that honors wounds as proof of survival, the part that stands even when it's terrified, then leave us a review, not for vanity, but because it helps others find their way to the firelight. It helps the saga grow. It helps this living revival of Viking legacy and lore continue. So, if you haven't done so, follow, subscribe, come closer, because the next story has already begun. And lastly, be bold, be strong, and awaken the Viking in you.